Hello, I'm Mr. Potts, and I make casino games in Rust, and today I'm going to show you how you can make your very own luck or not luck gambling machine. Okay, let's get started. Here's a list of the components that you'll need. Feel free to screenshot it for later. And here's a list of raw materials needed to craft those components. Alright, so first things first, we're going to want to make a home for our gambling machine. I like to use these vending machines with storage monitors on the back to start the game. You could do it a number of different ways, I just feel like that's the simplest. And then we're going to want a big sign above our vending machine to use as a display. Now, on the server that I play on, and a lot of other different servers, you can use the /sil command to paste images onto signs like this. But if your server doesn't have that, you could just freehand it, you know, be as artistic as you want. But since I have the image, I'm going to go ahead and use it. And then we're going to want some red industrial lights as part of our display. I like to line it up there with the bottom of the U. And I need another one there. And then another one there. If you hold shift, you can lock electrical components together. So lock these two together. Put it there. And then one there. Okay, so that's our display. And now we need a drop box to pay out scrap. You could use a normal box or anything else, but I like the drop box just because it's kind of like on the wall. And then we're going to need a storage adapter on our drop box and on our vending machine eventually. And maybe a little sign above the drop box that says, hey, grab your scrap. Don't be dumb. And then a green light to indicate when they won. Say, scrap. There we go. Alright. Next, we're going to make a vault. This is going to keep all of our scrap inside of it. I need to put a TC down so I can see wires and stuff. Okay, so vault is just a box. This would be somewhere in your base, a little bit deeper, where it's a little bit harder to get to. Unless you're on a PvE server, then I guess it doesn't really matter. But the more storage adapters you put on the box, the more scrap you can move out at one time. So as long as you can move 60 scrap per storage adapter per stack of scrap up to some amount. I think it's like 11 or 14 or something like that. So if you have one stack of scrap in there and you have 4 storage adapters on there, it'll take 60 times 4 or 240 per tick maximum through a conveyor. So since to play the machine, it costs 100 scrap, and if they win, they get 190. So since we only need to move 190 if they win, 4 adapters on one box would be just fine. So we're going to take all 4 of those adapters and we're going to combine them into one output. Just go from the out to all of these into an in on a combiner. Plug this combiner into this combiner. And there we go. So we've just got all these adapters combined into this one output. So that's where our scrap's going to come from. Next, we're going to need a note factory. So the way it works is you buy a note from the vending machine. I sell them for 100 scrap. And then that will send a pulse through this storage monitor. And that will start the whole game. So I need to have notes perpetually crafting back here so they never run out. So let's get an adapter on there. And then I use a tier 1 with an industrial crafter on it. Need to research a note here. Okay, while that's researching, we'll fill our vault with scrap. Have that set aside. And we're going to have it so the vending machine puts scrap back into the vault every time they play it too, so there's never scrap sitting in the back of that vending machine. Okay. Okay, so we're crafting notes. And now we need to get ourselves a little bit of power. Usually this would come from wind turbines and batteries and stuff, but we're just going to use a test generator to keep it simple. Oh, that's not a test generator. 1 second. That's the test generator. Silly me. Okay, we don't need that or that or that or that. I'm going to just combine 2 of these outputs just in case I need more than 100 power. Okay. So I'm just going to have a row of branches back here. That is everything that needs to have constant power running to it. So this will be my crafters, some of my conveyors, the storage monitor, stuff like that. Just chain all those together, power out to power in. Plug that in. Okay. The industrial crafter takes 1 power. Turn on, let's get some wood in there. Okay, now we need a conveyor to move the notes into our note storage here. Just because we want a little bit more than 4 every time. Okay. This needs 1 power. Oops. What did I plug in? Nothing? Oh. Oh boy. Alright. That was really confusing. I was lagging for a second there. Alright, so I actually want to give this conveyor 2 rust watts of power because I want to make use of the pass-through on it. So all I'm going to do is go from the pass-through into the turn-on function. That way, anytime it has power going to it, it's also turned on. And that just keeps your teammate from coming up to it and accidentally hitting E and turning off your conveyors. Or sometimes when the server restarts, it'll turn off a conveyor when it should be on. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing here with the industrial crafter. I'm going to go from the turn on function into a branch and give it 1 power. Next, I'm going to set up the main timer for the game. This timer will be turned on whenever somebody makes a purchase from that vending machine. I'm going to give it some power. I think it ends up needing 17 power. We're going to plug that into some branches here. Just like that, chain them all together. So now whenever this timer's active, these branches are also active. Okay, to make this vending machine turn on this timer, we're going to use the storage monitor on top. So we're going to power the storage monitor with 2 rust watts of power. We need 2 rust watts because the storage monitor itself takes 1 rust watt, and then we need 1 left over to turn on our timer here. So make sure you're going from the power out on the storage monitor into your timer. You want to use the power out, not the pass through. Make sure that goes into the toggle on function. So now anytime something moves around in this vending machine, it'll turn on this timer and row of branches. Next, we'll make our timer turn on these 2 vertical lights because they're always on when the game is running. So we'll branch out 2 power from here, 1 for each light. And we'll plug it into here and pass through into here. So now when the timer's on, these two lights are on. Okay, so we need to be able to flip-flop back and forth between the F and the L. And to do that, we can use a memory cell. And we'll give it 2 power coming from our timer here. And from the inverted output on the memory cell, we'll plug that into the 2 industrial lights that make up our F. So that's this one, pass through that one, into the middle one. So now when this timer's on, it should show an F. To make the L, we'll go from the other side of our memory cell, and we'll plug that into the industrial light that makes up our L, like that. To switch between the two on a memory cell, you can use the toggle function to go back and forth between them, or you can use the set and reset functions to choose one in particular. So if I put a button here, hitting the toggle function, and I give it power, right now it's an F. If I hit it, it should go to an L. If I hit it again, it should go back to an F, and so on. So we need to make a circuit to sort of hit this toggle function over and over and over again while this timer is active. So we're going to make a kind of pulse circuit. And to do that, I'm going to use a blocker. And this is just because I need to block it later to stop it from pulsing. And I'm going to use a branch set to 1, a timer, a blocker, and a branch. You set the timer to 0.25 seconds. This is how long it's going to wait in between pulses. And we're going to power our branch and use our branch to power our blocker and our timer. And then we're going to go from our power out on our timer into the block function on our blocker. We're going to power out from our blocker into the power in on our branch. And then we're going to branch out 1 power to the turn on function, the toggle on function on the timer. So now out of this power out, if I give that 3 power, 3 power, it should pulse out this power out every 0.25 seconds. And we can plug that power out into the toggle function on our memory cell. So now it should go back and forth between the two every 0.25 seconds. Now we're going to do a delay circuit so that when this timer gets activated, it'll wait a few seconds and then it'll block our lights from pulsing back and forth as well as do a few other things. So to make a delay, we're going to do a timer and then a blocker, and then we need a branch to power both of them. We're going to chain our 2 branches together, branch out 1 power from the first one to power our timer, branch out 1 power from the second one to the toggle on function of our timer, power out from the second one into the power of our blocker, and then power out from our timer into the block function of our blocker. So now when it receives power from here, it'll wait this amount of time and then let power out here. So if I give this, I think it ends up needing 10 power from our main game timer there. And I'm going to put a branch above this because I need this to do other things in the future as well. And then if we branch out 1 power from there into the block function of our pulse circuit here and set the delay on the timer to like 4 seconds. So now when this timer's activated, it'll pulse for 4 seconds until this timer's up, and then it'll stop. Next, we're going to make a circuit that decides between the L and the F after this delay. To do that, we need to make a binary randomizer, which is just a fancy way of saying a switch that randomly controls 2 things. So we need our RAND switch, a memory cell, and then we need a branch to power both of those, and 1 more branch to control the reset function on our memory cell. String all the branches together, branch out 1 power from the first branch into the power on the RAND switch, branch out 1 power from the second branch into the set on the RAND switch, Branch out one power to the reset on the memory cell. Power out from the RAND switch goes to the set on the memory cell. And then power out from here into your memory cell there. So now, when it receives power down here, it has a 50% chance to hit this set function on the memory cell and let power pass through this output. And then it has a 50% chance to fail and hit the reset function on the memory cell, letting power pass through this inverted output. So if we plug that into our delay here, I'm actually going to use another branch because I need this to do one more thing in the future. We power out into our random circuit here. And then this will go into a branch each. And we can branch off one power from each of those. One into the reset function of our memory cell that controls our lights. And one into the set function of the memory cell that controls our lights. Like that. So now, when I hit the main game timer, it should flicker back and forth, and then randomly decide on one after the timer's up. Alright, now we need to make it so our machine actually does something when the player wins. So if we come over here to our randomizer, this right branch is everything that happens when the player wins, and this left branch is everything that happens when the player loses. And we want it so when the player wins, it'll light up this light, it'll play a song on this boombox, and it'll turn on this conveyor, which gives them 190 scrap. So let's power our conveyor, and let's power our boombox. Takes 10 power for a boombox for some reason. And then we need to actually have an extra branch here on our win output for our randomizer. So when I told you this took 10 power earlier, I lied to you. Apparently it takes 11 power, and then you got to increase the power going to this timer by 1 as well. So instead of 17, make it 18. And now we should have enough power coming out here when they win to do all the things I want to do. So branch out one power to the boombox, to the toggle play function, and then go from the power out here into our light, pass through the light into the turn on function of our conveyor. And then we're going to set our conveyor to scrap and set the buffer to 190. That way every time this thing moves scrap, it'll move 190. And then we need to plug that into our scrap vault. So now we have our box full of scrap connected to our conveyor, and it's going to move it into the player's drop box like that. And then we also need to go from the filter pass into the turn off function. So that way, every time this thing moves a chunk, it'll also turn itself off and wait for next time. So let's see if we can get a win here and see if everything's working. There you go, a win, light turns on, music plays, conveyor turns on, moves 190 scrap, and then turns itself off. Okay, next we're going to do our vending machine stuff. So first things first, administrate it and sell notes for scrap, 100 scrap. And then we want to make it so there's only ever one note in here for the player to buy, because if there's more than one note, the player could buy a second note while the game's still running and it would just screw everything up. So to do that, we'll use a conveyor and we'll give it some power. Set the conveyor to note and set the max to 1. That way it only ever moves 1 into the vending machine for us. And then we got to connect that into our big box of notes here. Right there. And then out into our vending machine. and we'll have this conveyor turn on as soon as this delay is finished. So we have one more output here from earlier. Plug that into our turn on function, and then do the same thing we did over here. Go from the filter pass to the turn off function. So that way every time it moves a note, it'll stop and wait for next time. So let's play it. After this 4-second delay, it should turn on this conveyor, move one note, and then stop. So now our game should pretty much work. Buy a note. There's not another one in there for me to buy. And then I win. And shortly after I win, it should pop up letting me buy another note. There you go. I can buy another note. It keeps on going. Next, we're going to make it so our machine removes the scrap from our vending machine and puts it in our scrap vault. So to do that, it's very simple. You just need a couple of conveyors on the wall. Power them both. And then go from the pass-through to the turn-on function, so they're always on. And then we need an industrial splitter for our vending machine here. Plug that in like that. Out to our new conveyors. And set our conveyors to move scrap. And then go out from our conveyors into our scrap vault. And you can just go into one of these storage adapters here, like this. And then you can go from the other conveyor into a different storage adapter. Like this. So now our conveyor should be moving scrap out of that machine always. And you'll notice when it moved the scrap, it actually started our machine. And that's just because, you know, anytime something is updated in this vending machine, it'll send a pulse to this storage monitor. And it sent a pulse and activated our timer. But usually that won't happen because when the conveyors are moving scrap here, this timer is already active. So it tries to hit this timer again, but since it's still going, it doesn't actually do anything. So that should work just fine. Now whenever we buy a note, we look at the back of the vending machine, it's already taken our scrap and put it into the scrap vault. Okay, our game is done. I want to do one more optional step here though, because sometimes depending on server lag, this conveyor, when it moves a note into the vending machine, it'll activate the storage monitor again, which will play our game when we don't want it to. So if that happens on your server, an easy fix is to throw a switch up here next to your storage monitor, unplug the power to your storage monitor with a right click, plug it into the switch instead, and then go from the switch back into the power on your storage monitor. And now we're going to make it so this switch turns off when our game is played. So to do that, come over here to your main game timer. You got to give it one more power, so go from 18 to 19. And then branch out one power from here to the turn off function of our switch. And then to turn it back on, we're going to use our note conveyor. We're going to use the filter pass from our note conveyor to turn our switch back on. And to do that, we have to use an AND switch because we want this filter pass to still turn off our conveyor, but the filter pass can only ever put out one power. So if we go from our filter pass into one half of an AND switch like that, and then we power the other half of the AND switch with 2 power, that means whenever this filter pass is active, it'll complete the requirements for the AND switch and it'll pass through 2 power through this right here. So we need to pass through that 2 power into a branch off 1 into the turn on function of our switch, and then power out back into the turn off function on our conveyor that we unplugged earlier. So now when I buy a note, it should flip our switch off here. See, it's red. And then when our note is deposited back in the machine, it should switch back to green like that. And it's ready to go again. Okay, that is the luck or not luck machine. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.